I should start by saying that I don't believe in ghosts. Or at least I didn't, until I transferred to Ridgeway High. I was 17 when my parents uprooted my life and moved us to the small town of Blackwood, Pennsylvania. My dad got a new job, one of those corporate promotions that meant more money but also meant leaving behind everything I knew, my school, my friends, my entire existence in Chicago. My mom promised it would be a fresh start, but all I saw was a slow, dead-end town with old brick buildings and a high school that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. The moment we arrived, I knew something was off. The people were nice enough, but the way they looked at me, like they were sizing me up, like they were waiting for something, gave me the creeps. Ridgeway High was even worse. The school had that eerie, historical charm. Tall stone walls, Gothic windows, and halls lined with old class photos dated back to the 1800s. It was the kind of place where you expected to turn a corner and see a ghost staring back at you. I wasn't exactly eager to make new friends, but being the new kid automatically made me a curiosity. That's how I met Tommy, Jake, and Claire. Tommy was the loudmouth, always cracking jokes even when they weren't funny. Jake was the quiet one, the kind of guy who never spoke unless he had something important to say. And Claire? Claire was different. She had this sharp, skeptical look, like she didn't trust the world but was trying to figure it out anyway. They were the ones who first told me about room 105. Every school has its ghost stories, but Ridgeway had one that everyone seemed to believe. The legend of the locked classroom. According to the stories, room 105 had been sealed off for decades. No one used it. No one went inside. Teachers avoided even talking about it. But if you walked past it late at night, some people swore you could hear whispers coming from behind the door. Others said they saw movement through the crack under it, shadows shifting, like something was still in there. Claire told me the reason why. Back in the 1980s, a teacher killed himself in that room, right in the middle of class. Pulled out a gun and she made a finger gun gesture against her temple. Boom! Right in front of his students. The school shut down the classroom permanently after that. No one ever taught in there again. They even removed it from the school map, like erasing it could make people forget what had happened. I laughed when they told me. Come on, you actually believe that? Claire shrugged. Believe whatever you want. Just don't go near it. You can probably guess what happened next. A couple of weeks into the school year, we got to talking about room 105 again. Tommy, being the idiot he was, suggested we break in. If it's really just a storage closet, we'll know the whole thing's bullshit, he said. Unless you're scared. I wasn't scared. Or at least I wasn't about to let him think I was. So that's how, on a Friday night, the four of us sneaked into Ridgeway High through a side door that Tommy swore would be unlocked. It was, and made our way down the empty halls. It was different at night. Darker, colder. The hum of the vending machines and the occasional flicker of the emergency exit signs were the only signs that the school wasn't completely dead. When we got to room 105, the door was just like everyone said, locked. Guess that's it, I said, secretly relieved. But Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out a hairpin. Give me a second. She jimmied the lock like she had done it 1,000 times before. After a few clicks, there was a soft creak and the door swung open. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Desks were still arranged in neat rows, untouched. Papers lay scattered on the floor, yellowed and brittle. The blackboard had faint remnants of chalk scribbles, math equations, half-erased words. And then there was the smell. Stale, dusty, but underneath it, something rotten. Jesus, what is that? Tommy covered his nose. Jake pointed at something on the teacher's desk, a single piece of chalk, freshly broken in half. We hadn't touched it, but something had. Then the door slammed shut behind us, and the real horror began. The second that door closed, the temperature dropped. I don't mean a little chill. I mean full body shivers, breath turned to mist, a deep, bone-chilling cold that felt unnatural. That wasn't the wind, Claire whispered. Her bravado was gone. Jake tried to handle. It's locked. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight. The second I turned it on, the screen glitched. Static flickered across it before it went black. Dead battery. Tommy cursed under his breath, shaking his own phone. Mine too. Then we heard it, the sound of chalk scraping against the blackboard. slowly, painfully, like someone was dragging it, writing something. But there was no one there. Claire grabbed my arm so hard I felt her nails dig in. Jake took a slow step back. The air was thick, suffocating. We all turned at the same time to the board. There, in fresh white chalk, 4 words had appeared: "You shouldn't be here." Then the whispering started. Not just one voice, dozens of them, murmuring, overlapping, coming from every direction like the walls themselves were whispering our names. The desks began to rattle. The papers on the floor lifted into the air, swirling like they were caught in a hurricane that none of us could feel. A low, guttural laugh echoed from the darkened corner of the room. Then came the footsteps, soft at first, like someone stepping carefully between the desks, then heavier. Closer, a chair tipped over. A shadow moved, and then, from the far side of the room, a figure emerged. Not a normal shadow, a shape, rising, shifting, impossibly tall. A man, or what had once been a man. His face was wrong, twisted, stretched, his eyes black voids, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. He lifted one hand, fingers elongated and warped, and pointed at us. The lights exploded overhead, glass raining down, that horrible, endless whispering rising into a deafening roar. Then, everything went black. I never wanted to move. No 17-year-old does. But when your parents split up in the most dramatic fashion possible, I'm talking screaming fights, broken dishes, and divorce papers slapped on the dining table like a last-minute school project, you don't get much of a choice. So I ended up here, Hollow Oak, Pennsylvania, a town so small you could drive through it in 5 minutes and still have time to grab coffee at the only diner in town. A town so unremarkable it might as well have been erased from the map, except for one thing: Hollow Oak High School. It wasn't famous or prestigious. It wasn't even notorious for bad test scores, but it had stories. Whispers of missing students, strange figures in the hallways, and a past that teachers refused to talk about. At first, I thought it was just the usual small-town superstition. Every school has its ghost stories, right? I was wrong. The first day in Hollow Oak was miserable. My mom and I moved into a 2-bedroom rental house on the outskirts of town, right next to a stretch of woods that felt a little too dark at night. It was old and creaky, but my mom loved it. She said it had character. I said it smelled like mold and regret. The school wasn't much better. Hollow Oak High was a large brick building that looked more like a prison than a place of learning. The hallways were dim, the floors creaked, and the fluorescent lights flickered like they were trying to give everyone migraines. I expected to be the loner kid, the awkward new guy who sat alone at lunch. But on my first day, I met Nathan, Jess, and Eric. Nathan was the talker, always cracking jokes even when they weren't funny. Jess was the kind of girl who could either be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how much she liked you. And Eric, well, Eric was the quiet one, the kind of guy who always seemed like he knew more than he let on. They took me in immediately, and within a week it felt like we'd been friends forever. But they also introduced me to the stories. So you know about the ghost, right? Nathan asked one afternoon while we sat outside on the bleachers. I rolled my eyes. Which one? Jess leaned forward. The girl in the yearbook. Every year, someone sees her, Eric added. In group photos, just standing there in the background. That's dumb, I said. It's probably just some weird editing mistake. Tell that to the people who've seen her, Jess said. Better yet, tell that to the people who disappeared after seeing her. I laughed, but the way Eric looked at me, serious, almost warning me, made my skin crawl. Later that day, as I walked to my last class, I had to pass through the old wing of the school. It wasn't officially abandoned, but it might as well have been. Half the classrooms were empty, the lockers were dented and rusted, and the air felt thick, like the walls were holding in secrets. I noticed the change almost immediately. The moment I stepped into the hallway, the usual school noises, chatter, footsteps, the distant ring of a bell seemed muffled, as if I had stepped into a different space entirely. My footsteps sounded too loud, echoing back at me in a way that didn't feel normal. And then I heard it, a whisper. At first, I thought it was the vents or the wind sneaking through a crack in the walls, but it wasn't. It was voices. Low, hushed, overlapping whispers, like a group of people murmuring just around the corner. I stopped walking, straining to hear. The whispers stopped too. A slow chill crawled up my spine. I turned my head, scanning the empty hallway. Nothing, just rows of lockers and closed doors. I shook my head, forcing a laugh. This school was getting to me. I kept walking. The moment I took another step, the whispers started again, only now they were closer. I could almost make out words. My name? A warning? A question? I couldn't tell. I reached the end of the hallway and turned the corner. The second I did, the noise stopped completely. Silence. I glanced back. The hallway was empty, but for a split second, just before I turned away, I thought I saw something. A figure. Small, standing in the shadows between the lockers, watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew better. It started with curiosity.
That stupid, dangerous feeling that makes people in horror movies do dumb things. Nathan, being Nathan, dared me to go to the yearbook room.
It was in the oldest wing of the school, past the library. The hallway leading to it was known as the Whispering Hallway because people swore they heard voices when they walked through it alone. We went at lunch. The door was unlocked, and inside the room smelled like dust and ink. Old yearbooks were stacked against the walls, dating back to the 1950s. We flipped through them, half laughing at the old hairstyles and weird fashion choices. But then, in a 1993 yearbook, we saw her. A girl with long, dark hair standing in the background of a crowded hallway shot. Her face was pale, her expression blank. She looked out of place, almost translucent. Just traced her finger over the page. That's her. There has to be an explanation, I said. But my voice sounded hollow. Nathan flipped to the next year's book. She was in that one too. And the next. Same face, same blank stare. Always in the background watching. This is messed up, Eric muttered. We should go. And we did. But that night I couldn't stop thinking about her. A week later, the school took the senior class picture. It was a huge event. The entire class gathered on the front steps. The photographer gave the usual instructions. No blinking, no stupid faces, everyone smile. I didn't think about it until the yearbooks arrived. I wasn't even looking for her. But when I turned to the class picture, I felt my stomach drop. She was there, standing right behind me. No one had seen her that day. No one remembered anyone standing behind me. But there she was. Her dark eyes locked onto the camera, and this time she was smiling. She had never smiled before. That night I had a dream, or at least I thought it was a dream. I was in the school. The hallways were empty, the lights flickering. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I turned, and she was there, the girl from the yearbook, only now her face wasn't blank. It was twisted into something unnatural, her grin stretching too wide. She whispered something, but I couldn't understand it. I woke up drenched in sweat. My phone buzzed. A message from Eric. Check your phone. Now. My hands were shaking as I opened my photos. Somehow, a picture had appeared in my camera roll. It was a photo of my room, taken while I was asleep. And in the corner, standing by the door, was her.